Hi everybody, it's Annette from The Art of Intuition, and we're going to do a fun one today on rebounds and the energetic reason why rebounds do not work. And I might make this a series where I touch on a lot of sayings that have held true through the decades and the centuries, and how they, 9 times out of 10, it's always going to be that outlier, and we will go over the outlier in a little while, because I know everyone watching this might hope they're going to be the outlier and that's going to be them. It's kind of like winning the lottery. Why that can sometimes play out a different way. So I decided to kind of go a little fun route for the next couple of videos, because I was reminded of something that I had a doctor say to me once decades ago. And she was talking about Thanksgiving and Christmas, and how when she saw patients during that time period, she always had a box of tissues. Because everybody was crying. Every patient she saw was crying. Either they had to go home and visit their family, or they didn't have any family. Either way, everyone was sad and everybody was crying. So we're going to take a break from our more delving into the deep videos and have a little bit of levity and fun with some very common things that happen in our human life that have become almost, they're jokes. They are satires of themselves. I can't even think of the word I'm trying to use. They are, I can't even think of the word, but you know what I'm saying. These things are everyone knows about this, right? It doesn't matter how old you are. When someone says they're dating someone who either just got divorced or they're separated and blah, 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 this is the first person they've dated, and after a long relationship, everyone will say the same thing. Oh my God, you're the rebound person. It's like a Seinfeld episode, right? You're the rebounder. It's not going to work. Okay, so why doesn't it work? Why don't the rebounders work? When you complete a cycle energetically, you go through a reset period, right? So when people get separated, people get divorced, people break up, what happens is their frequencies are no longer compatible. So someone is trying to sync up to a different frequency. You can say their soul contracts are over, they've completed what they've got to complete, and they're now going to go on to a different frequency. And whether this person shows up in the new frequency, yet to be determined, because it depends on what everyone's doing in that frequency, and if they can get to that frequency. So what will happen is you go through this period where you have to let a reality reset. You cannot enter into a reality, and I've done a lot of videos on this. You cannot enter into a reality where you have not given it time to energetically reset. And that means your body has to do the energetic reset. And that can take 3 months, it can take 6 months, it can take 9 months. It takes time for your body to energetically reset. It takes time to clear that old energy out, and it takes time to link yourself up. You can think about it like a radio frequency. Link yourself up to the new frequency, right? So you're kind of still operating on the old frequency. You're operating on the old loop. You're trying to fill an old space, right? Because you don't know what the new frequency is yet and what realities are there. And you don't understand what that's going to feel like because you're not there yet. So what will happen is you meet people during this time, and I guess for now we will be the person that is, we're not the person we're meeting, that would be the rebounder, we're the reboundee. I'm not really sure how it's going to work, but if we meet a person during this time, we have not let anything reset, right? So we're going to be in a relationship with this person, but the minute our frequency clears that old frequency that they're operating under, the relationship's operating under, and that doesn't mean that they are specifically that frequency, but something in their body is attracting them to that frequency that we are also vibrating out, right? There's a match somewhere, okay? And because we're still at that same frequency, the minute we reset, we're no longer going to be interested in the old frequency. And because we did not allow anything to reset, what has happened is we can drag a lot of people into things. And the guy said, oh, it's not going to happen. We're not going to do that to this person, whatever. And 9 times out of 10, that's what happens. Because we haven't allowed the reset yet. The minute we get to, our body can get to the next frequency, and what this person helps us do, They also will help. They have a soul contract to come in and do this. So people who have been the rebounder or the reboundee, and everyone's been on both sides of the rebound. I know they have been. I know I have been on all sides of the rebound too. Back decades ago in my human consciousness, where everyone's on both sides of it. Okay, so we're not judging what side you're on. Doesn't matter. There's no judgment on it. It's just to explain energetically why it happens. So we all have soul contracts to be there. So they're fulfilling the purpose of helping you clear and reset, okay? They're helping you kind of get there quicker a lot of times. So they're going to help you reset. They're going to help you get your frequency higher and higher and higher, so you can now link up to the new frequency your body was trying to get to. And all the old realities, including the older relationships, start to fall away. And anything we've constructed that's in that old frequency kind of goes with it. And 9 times out of 10, the people go with it too. And that includes the person that we met, well, we were kind of on the rebound. Because we're now at a different frequency. We've now linked up to the new frequency, and we're no longer a match, right? We're different. We've shifted. We've now shifted completely out of it, and now we're not really interested in that anymore. It's too much of the old. It's too much of the old reality, and we can't hold that anymore. The whole reason why we left it to begin with. So, we have the soul contracts with the people. So I want to repeat that because I want to make that clear. They come in, they also help us clear victim energy, and we help them clear victim energy, because they're going to be victim energy about, oh my God, I can't believe they left me, and I thought we were going to be together forever, right? As the reboundee or the rebounder. I can't remember how we were going to denote them, but you get where I'm going. It helps everyone clear victim energy. You're clearing victim energy about the old relationships. They're going to be clearing victim energy because they felt like they were a victim in the whole thing, because they came late to the party, kind of just when you're kind of blowing out the candles and turning out the lights, right? They're coming in at the tail end of that frequency for you. And the minute you're done with it, everything goes with it. That is why these things kind of get in the, what do they call it, the zeitgeist, whatever. These things are kind of embedded in. No matter what age you are, no matter who it is, everyone kind of can see it coming way before it gets there. And even though we know that, and that's another thing, it's like, okay, everyone knows it, how does it continue to happen? And it goes back to the soul contracts. It's an energetic match. You agreed to do it. You agreed to be there when they were on the rebound. You agreed to fill that role. You agreed to be that person for them. And then they will go on eventually, if they're still, it depends. Either that's going to kick them into an awakening, and they might never go back and revisit human relationships in that context again, or they're going to eventually go on to something that more matches their frequency, and they're going to now continue to go on with their human experience. It's going to be different for everybody. It depends on how traumatic it was, the relationship they were in, and leaving that relationship. So when we are in the middle of these things, as humans, we don't understand. We don't understand why it happened. And if we look back at a lot of different things that are sayings, things that are kind of have been melded into these things always happen. You can go with people who just pop up. You can go with leopards don't change their spots, midlife crisis. I mean, there's probably a zillion more I can't even think about. If anyone has any, that's probably going to be a fun thing we can do over the holiday season, is to go through some of these. So put them in the comments below, and I will give you an energetic reason as to why it plays out that way and why 9 times out of 10 it plays out that way. Now, as for that 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100, or maybe we go even 1 out of 1,000 times, why doesn't it always turn out that way? Well, we have standard soul contracts, which is the typical rebounder, that you're just going to kind of help them get to a certain place, and then they're going to then go on once they've really anchored in that new frequency. Because even in a human consciousness, we're still anchoring in a higher frequency. We're not just doing that once and we never do it again. We're constantly doing that. We're constantly going to be getting a new frequency. We're constantly going to be going into that. So the more we go into new frequencies, and the more we go into getting more and more and more of that, even though we don't take it very quick as humans, that's why I say resets can take a year for a human consciousness to go through. And that's how we repeat a lot of the same stuff during that time, because we don't know that's what we're doing. We don't know enough to let the reality reset. But when you get into ascension, you start to be able to see that. You can look back and see that. I have to get it time to reset. I cannot enter back into these things until they reset. Until I have complete clarity on what happened, I have to be able to give that time. Now, how do you know if you've reset? How do you know you're linking up to something new? You're going to have very little interest in the old or anything that reminds you of the old. And a lot of people will say, well, a lot of times the person you meet during this time period might be totally different than what you left. That doesn't mean it's energetically different. You know, you will be interested in everything different energetically when you go through these bigger shifts. And what can happen is either people in that frequency with you, and once you transcend the frequency and you get to a different frequency, they can go with you. That's possible. Normally not. Normally you get new people in. But they can shift with you, and sometimes they do shift with you. You know, but normally, even eventually that'll peter out. You know, it's kind of like that another old saying, I'll throw that one in too. You know, you end up losing someone how you ended up getting someone, right? You know, if someone left you for somebody else, eventually that person's going to leave you for another person because they keep repeating patterns. You know, it goes into leopards don't change their spots because no one gives it. Humans do not give anything time to reset. We're always looking to fill the holes. You know, there's a hole here. I have a vacancy here. You know, I have a vacancy here. So what I'm looking at is for someone to fill that vacancy for me. You know, I want someone to come in and fill this vacancy because I have a vacancy here. And I need someone to come in and help with that. And that's kind of what human consciousness always does. That's why we get into all these messes repeatedly over and over again, because we can't give anything time to reset. We always keep getting into the messes over and over and over again. And that's why people write songs about us because that's what happens. We don't know when to quit. We don't know when to stop, but we just don't have that information yet. That's why, you know, once you've gone through a lot of these realities enough, you're technically at a different consciousness. You're at a different frequency. Maybe still operating from a human consciousness. You know, it also goes into one of the old adages where you would see someone you date another person, and they're totally acting different. You know, they're not the way they were with you. They're the perfect person, you know. They're the perfect boyfriend, the perfect girlfriend. You're like, where did that come from? That was not how they were with me. Well, home frequencies are home frequencies, but that does not mean they can show different aspects to people, but they can't hold the aspect. And that's kind of when you get it loops back around into what happens when people get in that rebound mode and trying to, you know, siphon energy off everybody else is what they're trying to do. They're trying to look for another patsy. You know, you're trying to look for another sucker to kind of be able to continue to go until you can kind of generate on your own. And when you can start generating the energy on your own again, that's when you you take it to a different frequency, because you're able to tune into something else, right? You're able to kind of get in that new reality and start to see it form around you. But for a lot of our human consciousness, we don't really have the capability to see that, but you can go back and see a lot of these things later on and understand, you know, why it happens that way. You know, people can show a different aspect of them, but overnight they can't change that their home frequency is still the aspect you knew. That's their home frequency, okay? They're just being able to hold different frequencies. Now, is that eventually they will not be able to hold that anymore, and they will go back to the way they were, unless they are doing a lot of deep inner work to clear that and anchor in higher aspects. But that's not happening in 20 minutes. It's not happening in 20 days. It's not happening in a month, okay? That's not how it happens. It doesn't happen that fast. So that's why you get all these things. These people acting totally different. All of a sudden you rebound people, and why none of it works, and no matter what side you're on, it's because no one's given anything time to reset. And if you're on the other side and you know better, remember, there's a soul contract drawing you there. That is one reason. You know, we think we're going to be the one where it's going to be different. You know, it's not going to be like it is. They're going to be different with us, or they're different. They're just showing us a different aspect. They're not going to be able to hold that aspect unless they've allowed themselves the time to completely clear the old reality, clear everything within them. They're just using the person they're with to do that. And that person's benefiting too, because they're also clearing whatever they have going on too. Remember, relationships happen for one reason: to clear programming. That's why. There's no other reason they happen. You know, not in human consciousness, not during certain parts of awakening and certain parts of ascension. They're just for clearing. We haven't reached the point yet until you're into many years of ascension where you can come together to create something. Where you don't have all the karmic stuff going on. You don't have all the karmic clearing going on. And that's another thing that can come into this is you're clearing karma. You know, you're clearing karma with a new person. You're clearing karma, your old karmic things that were going on. You're tying up an old karmic timeline. You normally know when you're tying up a karmic timeline because you'll get a flash of when the timeline started. Like I can be finishing up a project and I might get a flash of something that I did 8 years ago where I created karma, right? And when I do this one act, whatever it is, I'll know, whoo, I just cleared everything. I cleared all that karma I started back in, you know, I don't know, 2004. I just cleared it now. And it took me this long to clear the karma. So you don't really connect those dots when you're in your human consciousness because we're not able to yet. We don't have the consciousness, we don't have the higher intelligence to be able to do that. We can't see really. So we just kind of go through a lot of this stuff blindly and we kind of depend on these, like I said, these things. We know better, but we're still going to run in and do it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how many times we've heard these things and you can watch them on TV and we'll be saying, they're going, no, it's never going to work. You're the rebound person. It's not going to go down right. This is not going to happen. Everyone still does it, you know, because there's a lot of other things that go into play. This is kind of an oversimplistic view of it. But I want to caveat this at the end of this video. Once you can feel it, once you can see it, and once you understand the energetic workings and why this is happening, you then now cannot technically enter back into it without now creating karma because now you know better. Okay? It's kind of like a child learning something and then you get angry because the child goes back and does it again. You're like, why'd you do it again? You learned something. Don't touch the hot stove. And the child continues to touch the hot stove. Same things we do is in our human consciousness. We keep touching the hot stove. Maybe a little bit less each time, but we keep touching it to see, oh, wait, is that still hot? Once you get to these areas of ascension and you understand why certain things play out the way they did, entering back into them is now tying you to an old reality. You know, it is pushing you back into very, very, pushing you back into karmic realities. You're not creating new karma in a sense. You're overstaying your welcome. You're going to cause reality to collapse because you don't belong there anymore. You know, it's kind of like, you know, the Wizard of Oz. After a while, you know, you don't belong here. You can't stay here. You know, I'm trying to think, Alice in Wonderland, all these fantasy worlds. And you got to leave at some point, right? Because you don't belong here. Your frequency is not this. You can't stay here anymore. Your time is up. So in these realities, the time is up. That's why a lot of things will end very abruptly. You know, you can see people who are married for 70 years and all of a sudden they're divorcing and you're like, why now? I mean, it's been 70 years because the time is up, right? Their universe wants to move them on to something else. The universe wants to get them into something else. And the universe is telling them, your time is up. It's done. There's no reason to stay here anymore. There's no purpose to it anymore. You might have taken, you know, 7 decades to clear everything you had to clear in this relationship, but now it's clear and now we have no purpose anymore. Soul realities have to have a purpose. Human realities, they have a purpose, but it's a human, individualistic, selfish purpose. You know, yes, they're aligned on a soul level to help you clear, but they're driven by a human consciousness to why you want to create them in the first place, right? You're not doing this because of anything selfless. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. You're not doing anything for those reasons. So, all right, this is way longer than I wanted it to be. I'm going to leave it at that today. Like I said, if anyone has any other ones down below, I can't think of any more right now off the top of my head, of things that kind of tend to always play out the same way and everyone sees it. You know, and then you just don't at the time, or you know the trend is, you know, maybe 1 out of 1,000, but you think you're going to be that one. Drop them in the comments, and I will, like I said, I'll do an energetic reason on why it happens that way. Okay, keep practicing the art of intuition.